todos. Espero que estejam bem, é muito bom vê-los. Esta sessão vai ser em inglês, estou só a fazer esta introdução em português também para depois explicar como é que podemos ativar a tradução. For our guests, I'm speaking in Portuguese just to welcome everybody and to make sure that everybody understands how to enable the translation to Portuguese. Boa tarde a todos. Olá, Joana, boa tarde. Na medida do possível, se forem podendo ligar as câmaras, agradecíamos muito, que é sempre uma forma de nos aproximar, apesar deste método tecnológico de nos reunirmos à distância. So if you can connect the cameras, it would be very good for us to see your face, if it's possible. For us, it's also a challenge to meet in this distance way of doing this conference, but it's the only way to be able to connect people from around the world. So if it's possible to connect the camera, we will be very happy. This session will be in English, but we will also have simultaneous translation to Portuguese. So to make sure that everyone can fully understand what is being said by our guests, as the majority of the people who will be here will be Portuguese people. Although we also have some people from other countries like UK and US and Nigeria, Colombia, so I'll be speaking in English to be able to everybody to understand me. So welcome to this session. It's the third session of our thematic week of social connection and loneliness. We are Relational Lab. I belong to Relational Lab. I'm Marta Marques. I am a psychologist by formation, and I'm very happy to be here today with our super special guests. And I'm very honored to be able to be hosting you this evening in Portugal. I know that in some other countries it's still lunchtime, so I'm very happy to be here today. As I was saying, this is the third session that we are doing as Relational Lab here in Portugal to address this topic of the loneliness and social connection, and how important it is to put this topic in the agenda of our country, but also in the world. We are a quite new organization. We started in January, so for us it's very important to listen from those who are working these topics for a long period now, and to learn from their experience and their projects, and also their investigations that they are doing in the universities that they work for. So just to explain how you can connect the translation, I'll be speaking in Portuguese, because for the one who speak in English, I believe that you can follow the original audio. So I'll be speaking in Portuguese just to explain how you can connect the translation. Então, para os nossos colegas portugueses, só para explicar como é que funciona, na barra de baixo, preta, que tem todas as funcionalidades do Zoom, tem um ícone, que é um ícone globo, que diz interpretação. Se carregarem nesse ícone, vão ver aqui, como aparece na imagem, tem a opção de estar no canal que estão a falar inglês, que é o caso dos oradores, o áudio original, ou o canal em que estão a falar português, em que temos uma colega nossa a traduzir tudo aquilo que vai ser dito pelos oradores em português, para ser mais fácil de seguir. Esse canal tem a opção de poder simultaneamente estar a ouvir o áudio original, ou seja, o orador a falar por baixo, mas nós aconselhamos vivamente a que desativem essa opção, ou seja, não só carreguem no canal português, mas também carreguem na opção de desativar o áudio original, para garantir que conseguem perceber tudo o que é dito, porque fazem uma ponderação do volume do som e às vezes não se percebe totalmente a tradução. Portanto, só para recapitular, na barra inferior do Zoom tem um ícone que é o globo, podem carregar, que diz interpretação, podem carregar para ativar, carregam no canal, escolherem o canal que é em português e desativar o áudio original. Durante toda a sessão, nós vamos ter pessoas que vão ajudar se houver algum problema, portanto, se existir alguma dificuldade a ativar a tradução, podem sempre colocar uma mensagem no chat que o mais rápido possível nós vamos tentar ajudar a resolver. So, I think it's all set. I'm very happy to be here. I was saying that in the beginning, so just to welcome everybody who got in the meeting right now. We are on our third session of this week, and in our as we call it, International Conference on Social Connection. Today we have 5 different speakers who will be talking about different contexts and different realities and different countries actually, so it will be very rich and I think very interesting, and I'm very happy to be here with all of you to listen to them and to be able to learn the most that I can, and I hope you do too. Our first speaker will be Professor Manuela Barreto. Although she's Portuguese, she's living in UK, working in the University of Exeter for a long time now. And she's been working in this topic for a long period, and I believe that almost all of you have heard about her and her work. So we are very honored to have you here, Professor Manuela, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I able to share my slides now?
Yes.
Yes.
You can share.
Okay. Let me not start by the conclusion, preferably. Okay. Can you see my slides in slide mode rather than anything else?
Yes, it's perfect.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I can't get rid of this bar, but hopefully you don't see it. Maybe only I see it. Okay. Good afternoon. I was asked to speak about loneliness in schools today, so I will try and give you a quick whistle-stop tour through some of the work that we have done on this, while trying to refer to some of the ideas that I have about loneliness more generally. Do my best to keep to the 15 minutes. If anything, I sometimes speak a little bit fast, but please do ask me questions. If you need to interrupt me, please just do something, like unmute yourself and say something or so. But I will give you my email address at the very end, and that's an invitation for comments and questions. So please do let them come. So I guess because I'm the first speaker, one would normally define loneliness, but instead of imposing on you an academic definition, we have seen plenty of those. Anyone interested in the topic, I will give you some of the definitions that the students that we have researched with have given us. Oh, sorry. Have I stopped sharing? No.
No, we can see still.
Okay, sorry, it's just something happened. Okay, so when we speak to students, and in this particular project where we got these definitions, we spoke to adolescents across 5 different European countries. The students have talked about loneliness as something that is painful. Something. Can I just continue?
I think you can go on.
Okay, so as something that is painful and sad, and that they connect to this idea of not feeling connected to their peers. So the very idea of having no one who cares, and feeling hopeless about the future in terms of friendships and connection. What the evidence is showing is that this feeling of loneliness at school is related to poor sleep quality, poor physical health, both when young and later on in life, when examined prospectively. Poor mental health, which includes at the extreme suicidal ideation and actual suicide. Risky behaviors, including risky health behaviors such as drug abuse, and the dislike of being at school, leading to poor academic achievement. So we find loneliness at school important not just because of these negative consequences, but also morally, but also because it is highly prevalent. So what the research is showing is that loneliness is most prevalent in young people, against what often is stereotyped as a convenient convergence of stereotypes of old people and of lonely people leads us to think that loneliness is more frequent in older people. But actually, what the evidence is showing is that across country, it tends to be more prevalent in younger people. A study that I indicate there at the bottom that I conducted with colleagues using PISA data from 2018, so collected by the OECD, shows that on average worldwide, about 18% of 15-year-olds are feeling quite lonely at school, but this varies immensely across country, all the way from 7.5% to 28.2%, which is over a quarter of young people, of 15-year-olds, feeling quite lonely. Within countries, there is, of course, a lot of variation, and this can be connected to, for example, gender, usually looked at simply in terms of comparing men with women. Watch this space. We are about to publish a paper where we try to argue for a very different approach to examining gender and loneliness. But this is what we have so far. So more prevalent among girls, among first-generation migrants, among adolescents who have changed school in recent times, those with lower family socioeconomic status, adolescents who have been bullied, those who see their school as having a poor climate or a discriminatory climate, poor teacher support, and cultural factors usually explain some of the differences across country. Now, because this is such a problem with severe consequence and high prevalence, there have been a lot of interventions developed and implemented in schools. In this particular paper I'm flagging here, which is a book chapter, that's the 8. There's no trick there, it's just chapter 8 in the book. We try and look at the interventions that are being at least reported on, and that are being implemented in schools, and we try to pit them against the kinds of drivers that we know about of loneliness in schools. The kinds of interventions we see can be categorized in these 4 different groups. So improving the social or emotional skills of the adolescent who feels lonely, psychological therapy or counseling, enhancing social support, and learning a new hobby. All of these focus on the intrapersonal or interpersonal level, and therefore target only factors that operate at that level. All of the other kinds of factors are being neglected. And what the evidence is suggesting is that not only do these have very limited effects, either no effects at all or explain very little variance in loneliness, but these effects are also largely short-term. So these interventions are not having sustainable effects across time. Now, we have written about why this is the case, and we think that a very strong reason why this is the case is that the current understandings or dominant narratives about loneliness in academia and elsewhere focus way too much on individual deficits, and in fact focus mostly on individual deficits that, of course, then require individual solutions or individual level solutions. But this is misleading, and this is also erroneous, because loneliness, as we have reported in this report that I show here, is socially patterned. There are large inequalities and disparities in loneliness experienced by different groups of people. So it is unequally distributed across social groups. So we have shown that then this loneliness tends to be more prevalent in groups that are minoritized and devalued in a range of ways, just as happened with all sorts of other issues, such as, for example, health disparities. And we have argued in the paper that I indicate above there, Changing the Narrative, that this is one of the core reasons why loneliness really needs to be seen as a social injustice. I do not have time to go a lot into this today, but please do let me know if you would like to receive the paper or to talk to me about that. Now, I would like to also just briefly pause to say that this does not mean that we should be talking about these groups as at risk or vulnerable groups. Again, we are writing about this as we speak, but really the argument can be summarized as such. Talking about particular groups of people as at-risk groups is deterministic and essentializing. Loneliness is not a property of a particular group or identity. Loneliness is relational. It emerges because there's something wrong with particular relationships. It's also stigmatizing because it draws attention or blame to the group and the identity rather than to what happens to that group and identity. that drives loneliness. It's patronizing, and you can link this to the whole dialogue on politics of help that emerged in public health literature, because of course what it leads us to do is develop strategies that help particular groups by enhancing their dependence on particular systems or people, and therefore perpetuate oppression rather than provide autonomy and conditions for flourishing. It's also unhelpful. And it's unhelpful because the identity, the demographic itself, is the wrong target for intervention. And I will explain in a second why. So a better approach is to actually try to understand how these disparities emerge so that we can disrupt marginalization. It's to try to understand the role of contextual and structural factors, which are also much more modifiable than simply talking about identities or groups that are at risk or vulnerable. And to identify assets within these marginalized communities. That is, what are people doing when they are still remaining connected, despite the fact that they belong to such an at-risk group? So to do this, it is useful to think about loneliness in its context. Many have seen this kind of figure before, applied to all sorts of different issues, and we talk about it as the social ecology of loneliness. So loneliness is driven by factors that operate at multiple levels, and there's potential for exclusion at all of these levels, with schools being located at this institutional level. Schools are a particularly crucial institution for young people. It's where they spend a lot of their time. So if we think about this way, we can try and start picturing a whole host of relationships that are important when thinking about the social life of young people. So to start with, what we usually think about, peers, interpersonal relationships with your peers, not having friends, not feeling understood or supported by your peers, bullying, victimization, and outright exclusion are huge sources, huge drivers of loneliness for young people. But also relationships with teachers, very often neglected, but evidence is showing, including my own evidence in the PISA paper that I've already mentioned, that conflictuous relationships with teachers, feeling a lack of compassion, lack of empathy or trust, or even at the classroom level, lack of classroom inclusivity, are important drivers of loneliness for adolescents, particularly the loneliness experienced in the school context. But also schools themselves at the structural level, non-inclusive climates, the pursuit and encouragement of competition and the individualization of achievement, the lack of support networks within schools, such as clubs that target particular needs, and poor redress mechanisms for things like bullying and victimization. All of those are very important drivers of loneliness. So if we zoom in on some of these, we have talked about the mechanisms of interpersonal exclusion as drivers of loneliness, as well as mechanisms of structural exclusion. At the interpersonal level, important thing to start with is note that marginalized group memberships do not have direct effects on loneliness. They have mediated effects. It's not an automatic or inevitable link between belonging to a particular group and feeling lonely. It's mediated by processes of exclusion. So interpersonal exclusion has a whole host of impacts, for example, on physical health, on psychological well-being, on financial security, which then impair your ability to socialize in ways that actually prevent or address loneliness. So for example, if you are financially deprived, how are you going to get the resources to attend the social events that your peers attend? If you feel that you are likely to be bullied or excluded in other ways, why would you be motivated to join a social event with your peers? And of course, relationship strain or poor relationship quality can emerge from, for example, some of the psychological effects of exclusion, such as depression and anxiety. All of these together and by themselves lead to loneliness. And here, the attention then needs to be intervene at the level of interpersonal exclusion rather than simply looking at the end point, which is, for example, whether or not the person is engaging with others, or at the middle point, whether or not the person is feeling that they have the right social skills. At the structural level, we've spoken about multiple factors, perhaps 4 of which are more applicable to the school context. So the first one is what we call cultural hegemony, inspired by Gramsci. The idea here is that what usually is seen as acceptable or normative or valuable, for example, in terms of how you relate to other people, is determined by the dominant group. All other ways are socially constructed as deviant, and therefore you are to blame for relating to me in different ways. You are weird, you fix yourself. But in reality, if we think about this, really what this means is that the dominant group lacks social skills, such as the flexibility, the ability to adjust, and the ability to be inclusive, which need to be understood as core social skills. So instead of focusing on fixing the lonely individual, perhaps we need to try and teach everyone to value different ways of being sociable. We can talk about exclusive communities. So interpersonal exclusion isn't the only type of exclusion you see in schools. You can see that the whole ethos of the school can be one where particular groups of people are varied and others are either tolerated in the best case scenario or outright derogated. So school level attitudes about minorities, such as sexual minorities, for example, gender minorities, individuals with mental health difficulties, autistic people, need to be promoted. Positive attitudes need to be promoted. Positive behaviors. Cooperation needs to be a core value in schools, and highlighting the value of difference rather than simply tolerating difference. For example, by showcasing particular or unique contributions that particular students or experiences might bring to class. At discriminatory policies, we can look at policies at the level of country, state, etc., but definitely also at the school level. And here, what we need to think about is that often school policies are developed to cater for the prototypical student. The prototypical student, first of all, I wonder whether anyone is prototypical. It's average that is a little bit abstract, but overall, it definitely does not cater for those on the margins, for those who are different from that prototype. So the question we need to ask then here when looking at schools is, are we at schools catering for everyone with our policies? Are we not just tolerating, but celebrating and supporting difference in our policies and procedures? There's a lot of lip service, and so here we need to also think about implementation, not just about whether the policy is there, but whether we are actually implementing it in ways that the students agree that policy is effective. We also need to think about the context where schools are located. Schools do not operate in a vacuum. They operate in particular neighborhoods, and very often schools in the private neighborhoods are less well-resourced. So they might have fewer or less safe or less accessible hangout spaces where students can stay, sit, and then eventually merge and converge towards each other. Student poverty in poor neighborhoods is also highly detrimental because it can limit the students' opportunity to engage in social activities. So to develop better interventions to prevent or address loneliness in schools, what we argue is that we need to address drivers at multiple levels. Let's not be lazy and just refer students who are already suffer to corrective measures such as therapy or social skill training. Let's actually try to get to the root causes, which not only are more effective, but also they target more people in one go. And therefore, we might be preventing and addressing loneliness for a lot more people with a lot less work. Let's also engage and co-produce those interventions in each location with the students and the teachers and administrative staff in each school. But in doing so, let's not forget about the first point, because students and staff and administrative staff might not be able to come up with systemic factors, which tend to be much more hidden and less easy to detect as problematic. Let's do this with precision, define what each action is for, what driving factors it's targeting, for whom, and how we're going to evaluate its effectiveness. And let's not forget about potential barriers and, even more importantly, unintended effects. Good intentions are not enough. Many interventions out there do not have much effect or have short-term effects or potentially have effects on loneliness, but damage a whole host of other things. For example, by increasing the stigma associated with loneliness. And let's share learning. Let's develop toolkits where people can actually go and get inspiration from, but not use other people's strategies as templates, and instead work with our student bodies to develop those that are actually meeting the concrete needs of our student population. So in conclusion for today, I wanted to stress the idea that school loneliness is prevalent and problematic, but definitely not yet well addressed. That effective interventions require the recognition and identification of root causes and engagement with young people that are actually living those experiences. And I want to end by reminding us that loneliness is not a luxury problem. Loneliness is a social injustice and a breach of human rights. And for more on that, you can refer to the paper that I've mentioned already on changing the narrative. And for any questions or comments, please, please, please do contact me. I am always eager to hear from those who listen to my work. Thank you very much. That's all I wanted to say today.
Thank you so much, Professor Manuela. For us, it's really an honor to have you here and to be able to listen to you. And it was really difficult to choose a topic that you could talk about because your work is so immense and so interesting that it was really difficult, but it was really good to hear you about the schools. And I'll pass on to Dr. Latifa to talk a bit about also to this topic of schools. Dr. Lektifat is part of Global Initiative on Loneliness and Connection, and she'll be talking here about her project, and I won't present her because she will present herself, but it's also very inspiring for us to have you here representing Nigeria and to hear you and to hear your example and your inspiration. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody. It's very great to be here. And my name is Latifat Odunuga, and I'm representing Global Initiative on Loneliness and Social Connection. I'm a trained clinical and community psychologist, and I was just listening to Dr. Manuela speak, and she basically was speaking my mind. And I'm like, I think I'm about to go right now because she's basically done a lot of justice to this work on loneliness and social connection. So I think we can start presenting my work, please. The slides. Yeah, so the next slide. I'm gonna be starting today with a very personal story. The next slide, please. Yes, so like I said, my name is Latifa, and I'm gonna be starting today with a story. When I was growing up, my father did tell me that social wealth is determined by the number of people you could connect with. As young as I was thinking wealth, anything that has to be wealth related needs to have money involved. But this time he merged social and wealth together. So he told me at the time, and he said, social connection in our community is very crucial for community care and social justice. And that was all back in Nigeria where my life started. And at that time, I went to school with people who I considered their parents as very affluent and had a lot of money. They were financially powerful and privileged. My parents were not all that affluent, but they worked very hard to ensure that their children got quality education at all costs. At this time, I was beginning to question my identity as to whether I fit in or I belong to this community of other students whose parents had more money, more wealth, more status than my family. Apparently, just very young, I didn't know that even people who had money might experience loneliness. Some of these children that I encountered who were my peers at the time, even though their parents had money, they had everything they needed. Some of them were still experiencing loneliness because their parents had to go on different business trips, conferences, they had to go on different kind of things, and their parents were really not there. So I just wanted to bring it back to us again, to this room, that we always think that people who are wealthy or also privileged in our society are immune to loneliness or a social connection. Rather, we have to look at the holistic approach to this topic, where contextual factors continue to be important in determining loneliness and social isolation in our community. Just like I said, we have people in this room that are surrounded, we are surrounded by people in this room, friends, colleagues, students, who feel unseen or heard. And they're also in this room, just to let you know again that social isolation knows no boundaries, regardless of your race, your gender, your education. You could still be lonely, you could still be experiencing social isolation. So we're going to be going to some regular statistics that we have globally, where they're telling us that we can go to the next slide. They're telling us that over 300 million people experience chronic loneliness globally. In a study that was done in the United States, they're saying that 61% of workers in the US reported that they're very lonely, and that it actually has some impact on their productivity and their quality of work. And also, when a similar study was done for students in the United States, they're saying that it's about 4.5 times children and students who are lonely are more likely to drop out. And all of these experiences that I shared about my own personal lives, I saw students who couldn't even continue their education at some point just because they didn't have no parents. They have to live under the bridges just to survive. Children who would just opt to even fend for their own lives at the age of 7, at the age of 8. And all of these statistics that we have all over across developed countries, we might not have the same when it comes to speaking for Africa. We can go to the next slides, please. So if you look at this other study where Dr. Atman actually looked at loneliness and race, and we're actually seeing that loneliness and race is a very crucial topic, where they saw that 74% of Hispanic identifying people were reporting loneliness, and 72% of Asian individuals were also experiencing loneliness. 69% were Black or African American individuals, and 72% were Asian or Pacific Islanders. So when you look at this type of study that's been done in the US, I would hope the same will be for Africa, where we have a lot of countries that's actually in that continent, and we have very sparse studies that have been looking into social isolation and loneliness as a thematic area. We can go to the next topic. And still speaking on the next slide. So we're not going to be going through all this definition of key terms, but I know Dr. Manuela already did some justice to this. And I'm going to reiterate that loneliness is a social pain and a social injustice at that. And we have to let everyone out there know that this is a germane public health issue, and we don't have to leave anyone behind. We can go to the next slide. So in the same study that was so this is basically what we know. We basically know that all of these statistics is telling us that school age loneliness actually impacts a lot of school age children. We're also seeing that some of these past studies that we have in Africa, some of them have been conducted in Ethiopia, some of them have been conducted in Tanzania, but a lot of African countries are still not yet on board looking at loneliness and social isolation as a topic, right? So we know all of these factors like bullying, peer rejection, lack of supportive family environment, even looking at adverse childhood experiences to be a crucial factor that can actually help us reduce loneliness if well understood, right? So looking at all of these statistics that we know, we're not going to be repeating what we already know. So let us try to look at what we don't know. We can go to the next slide. So what don't we know? We're looking at cultural variation in all of these experiences. And I'm speaking from the lens of Africa. The statistic that I've been reporting earlier has been the ones that has been done in the United States, because I also live in the United States and I work as a mental health professional. But when it comes to Africa, we have to also respect cultural context in which people are living in. We're not just going to parachute into communities saying that we're trying to, come up with intervention. The kind of intervention that we are trying to endorse to communities should be the one that is made for the community and by the community. So there is limited understanding of how cultural norms shape perceptions and experiences of loneliness in different diverse settings. So we need to increase the awareness for social connection in our communities. And I'll tell you this, as someone who grew up in Nigeria, storytelling is something that has been very, very important in community care. When I was growing up, I remembered my grandmother would bring us together in a circle of other children who lived in our neighborhood, and she would tell us stories. And it was our responsibility at the time as children to be able to share what we've heard from the story, what we learned from the story. We're able to witness the lives of the protagonists. We're able to witness, what was missing in that whole story plot. And when you go back to how some communities have resolved, or combated like loneliness, I feel like storytelling is one way that can foster social connection in our communities. And I'm speaking from a person who grew up in Nigeria, where we would have, like, if someone was not in their neighborhood at the time, we actually knew that they were not around. Maybe the mother went to the store or they traveled. It was a way that our community was checking on each other just to make sure that we are okay. So also when we look at all of these intersectional factors, we can definitely do see that there is an interplay between identities like gender, race, disability, special needs, and all of these topics are still under researched. And when it also comes to like global comparability, we cannot really use the same scales that's being used to measure loneliness in a particular setting, to measure loneliness in global majority countries or indigenous countries like maybe like Nigeria, Africa. We have to understand the need for language adjustment when it comes to certain topics, or how people see or understand the concept of loneliness. And we also, what we don't know yet is also the role of emerging technologies, what we've seen with the impact of AI, artificial intelligence, and also virtual reality and digital tools. We're saying that people have more affinity to using all of these tools. And, it's not even, we don't even have enough data that's showing us that people using their phone more are likely to report more loneliness. But we're also saying that it's about the number of time that people are spending on the internet that's actually could be a predictor for how lonely they might tend to be. And all of these things are applying to school kids if you look at that. So I'm just going to go briefly up to the benefit of social connections in our community. Next slide, please. So when we look at why social connection is very crucial for children, for employees in the workplace, it actually can help boost their self-esteem. It can actually help their holistic health, including social, emotional, and physical well-being. We're also seeing decreased risks of cardiovascular diseases when people have a better way to connect with others. We also see stronger immunity because they know that they have social support. They know that they have people who are there for them, who can listen to them. So we're saying that there are benefits of connected workplaces in terms of productivity, in terms of job satisfaction, in terms of retention, in terms of efficiency or even efficacy. And also schools that adopt inclusive environment, we're saying improved academic performance, and like all these other psychological concepts that I've mentioned earlier about higher self-esteem, higher self-efficacy, better chances that they're not gonna do drugs, or like even having like longer implications of mental health outcomes. So we can go to the next slide, please. I saw that Dr. Manuela also did the justice to the social ecology. And also I know a lot of us are kind of attuned to Yuri Bronfenbrenner's ecological model. And then this is like a social connection ecosystem for school children. And we have to understand that it is important for us to integrate all of this level and understand how each of this level impacts children. on local and global context. How does it apply to me if I'm in Nigeria? What are these individual level factors? Like maybe like mental health challenges. Is this child having an exceptional need? Do they need to be in an exceptional class? Are they having social skills deficit? When we're looking at the micro system level, we're looking at how do we even look at the relationships and the direct interactions that this child has in their daily life. Are they able to talk to their friends well? What relationships do they have with the family? What are the teacher relationships? Is there any abuse at home? When we also look at the mental system, we're trying to look at the connection that this child has with their immediate environment. And all of these factors put together are the things that, promote like a positive social connection ecosystem for school children. If at any point any of this level is becoming dysfunctional, then I think we're just going to still be back to where we're having more students report loneliness or reporting social isolation or social disconnection. So we need to understand all of these important levels of development that and this context of development, so that we can know how to address all these issues that loneliness poses to us. As we can go to the next slide, please. So in terms of also like workplace, we're seeing several studies that's been done, and it's telling us that employees who report loneliness, might have, increase in sick days because they want to take time to relax and recoup so they can come back and do well. And then when people are taking more sick days, it's affecting the work that's also being produced, because if people don't feel like they belong to the workplace, they don't feel like coming. And all the microaggressions and the tensions that's being propagated in workplaces, poor collaboration of staff, people just having to go to work because they just have to, make a living. We have to work on different strategies to bring in sustainable social connection programs so that we can see better increase in social connection in workplaces, and all the factors and the social connection ecosystem for the children that I explained earlier can also be applied to adults in workplaces. Next, please. So because of all of this, AFRINIP has come together. AFRINIP was established in 2014 after the first regional forum on youth policies was done in Azerbaijan. The first global forum on youth policies was done in Azerbaijan in 2014, and it was the need that there needed to be like a place where policies can actually be followed up on in African countries. So when we look at this, AFRINIP actually started, and it was registered in Ghana in 2018 and became a formal NGO. And with this being said, a lot of African countries are still yet to be on board to implement the national youth policies that's been asked for them to implement in their various countries. As of 2014, 198 countries came together to have a national youth policy, right? And across all this continent, 37 states were either developing like a policy that was for young people, or some of them were revising. And 31 countries had no national youth policy document. And 14% of those countries were in Africa. So I think AFRINIP is actually there to start improving the need for young people to know that they have a youth policy document. They need to be aware of it. They need to know why this document is being created for them and how the things in them can be implemented. So with this being said, AFRINIP now decided to have other establishments in different African countries, where we've now had 45 member states now, 45 member countries under AFRINIP, and different people are doing a lot of things, for Africa on the continent and outside of the continent. We can go to the next slide, please. And when you look at some of this work that we've done to foster social connection in Africa, I think this year we did a Medicare outreach. We partnered with an organization called Mata Mental, where we did a dental cleaning for children who were diagnosed with autism in a local community. 200 children benefited from that dental initiative where we had to clean their mouth. They've never, some of them reported, I think most of them almost reported that they've never had any kind of oral hygiene. So we're able to bring that to helping them to clean their teeth out and ensuring that they can smile and their breath doesn't stink, and we can actually help improve their mental health due to that exercise. If you also see some of the works that's also been done here by Connecting Minds alongside with SOS-Devive, they've trained a lot of young people on mental health in Nigeria, and they've given over like 10,000 support to young people dealing with mental health challenges in Nigeria. And these are some of the works that we've been doing. Recently, AFRINIP also launched 9 directorates in Nigeria, in Africa, and Directorate of Health and Research is one of the directorates that was recently formulated. We can go to the next one. And I'm telling you again, we cannot do this alone. We cannot do this alone. And this is why I'm going to be introducing what we are doing with GILC, and that's Global Initiative on Loneliness and Social Connection. We are supporting system-wide national transformating approaches to build social connection. And with this membership with GILC and do all these things that we're doing in Africa, we're trying to bring all our work so that some of this work can be scaled on a higher level. Next, please. So if you look at GILC is a nonprofit membership organization that comprises of nonprofit that are nationally focused non-governmental organizations committed to end pressing global issues on loneliness and social isolation and promoting social connection. We support system-wide national transformative approaches to build social connection. GILC was founded in July 2020 by leaders from Australia's Ending Loneliness Together campaign and the United States Coalition to End Social Isolation and Loneliness. Our co-founders listed here, Dr. Joe Badcock, Dr. Michelle Lim, Andrew McPherson, and Edward Garcia. They're like all brought together organizations from all over the globe who have like shared vision of supporting organizations currently working on social isolation, loneliness, and social connection, and spurring the development of new organizations across the globe. Next, please. So today, GILC includes 20 nationally based nonprofit member organizations, 75 engaged organizations in our network of partners, and 500 plus researchers from all regions of the globe. We're working together to catalyze systemic change for global impact. This includes work on policy adoption, raising awareness within and across nations, and filling gaps in knowledge base through research. So part of the things that I'm trying to say here is we have an agenda for 2030. By 2030, are we going to be having our social connection goals where we really want to beat loneliness and social isolation to zero, maybe reduce to little or nothing. And we also are going to start looking at institution of global villages. So global village is an amalgamation of global and local, a synergy for change where we are all coming together to work against combating loneliness and social isolation in our communities. So I'm going to be leaving this with this conclusion. The adage, 2 heads are better than one, that we know. We know that when they say 2 heads are better than one, it speaks a lot to collaboration. We're asking you to join our movement. We want to work with you all. We want you to come together and let us combat this loneliness and social isolation. And this adage actually speaks to connection to schools and workplaces for productivity, better health outcomes, and even socio-economic development. Please, we cannot do it alone. We need you to join forces with us to combat loneliness and social connection. Let us build the bridges of connection that is connecting across all continents. Remember, we have a civic responsibility to be builders. We are building the bridges of connection. We don't want to build walls. one person at a time, one community at a time, one country at a time, one continent at a time, one policy at a time, and one partnership at a time. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much that you were going to be inspiring, and you were. So thank you very much, and thank you for bringing us also to another latitude, to not only to stand in Europe or in the north, but also to go to Africa and to listen to your example. It was very, very inspiring. So thank you very much. We'll pass on now to Professor Gemma. Professor Gemma is also from the UK, and she comes with some kind of connection to the topic because it's the after school generation, so young adults, so people who went out of the school not so many years ago, but also with a connection with space. And this is a topic that we in Relational Lab, we like to work a lot, to look at the quality of the space and the architecture and design of the spaces, and to see how this impacts this feeling of solitude or loneliness. And so we are very happy to be able to listen to you. Welcome, Professor Gemma, and the floor is yours. I think you are able to share your screen.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. So what can you see at the moment? Can you see my slides?
We cannot see it now, but I think in a second maybe.
How about now? Can
Not
you see my
yet.
slides?
Not yet. Maybe if you can reshare the slide.
Yeah, let me go back then. If I stop sharing and start again. Okay.
Now we are seeing the Zoom session and now the slides.
You don't want to see this. You don't want to see the
Yes.
Zoom session. Okay, I'll go back. Right, I'm just going to put a timer on so I keep to time, because I'm conscious we've got a few speakers this evening, and they're all obviously fascinating presentations. I completely forgot I was presenting in the last two bits because I was so engrossed in listening to the speakers. So I'm delighted to join you this evening to talk about some work that I've been involved in that is looking at the topic of social connection and the idea of loneliness and how it relates to places, particularly urban environments. So in the 15 minutes that I've got, I'm really just going to give some headlines, like an overview of looking at young adults' sense of loneliness and social connection in the city, and really give some thoughts or share some thoughts and provoke some ideas about how we can build, design, and promote the idea of social connections in cities. But before I do that, I was going to share some of the underpinning ideas where this work comes from as well. So before I start about the project that I've been asked to present, as Marta said, I'm based at University College London at UCL, and I'm in the faculty of the built environment at the Bartlett. And I guess I kind of say I'm not a technical specialist in anything. A lot of my work is methodological. I consider myself an engaged researcher, so I have an interest in projects and activities that are participatory, that involve either policymakers or local communities in the research process and in teaching processes as well. And a lot of my work falls under the really broad umbrella of thinking about urban health and sustainability, but also thinking about that not from a medical model of health, but actually how the social and environmental determinants in the built environment affect our health. And the picture on the slide is actually from a course that I teach at UCL. I'm a program lead for an MSc, which looks at health and well-being in buildings and in cities, and thinks about the different components of the built environment and how they impact upon our health. I'm also the faculty lead in the Bartlett for Impact, so that involves providing thought leadership and capacity building across the whole faculty in the Bartlett to think about the impact of our research and teaching, but also to make sure that we reflect on what we are undertaking research on so it is relevant and can be applied in the real world. So, as I said, today I'm going to talk about a project I was involved in with some colleagues around looking at the issue of loneliness in young adults. And I guess something that has run through my work, as well as it being engaged and participatory, is some ideas around the relationship between people and the built environment. And when I was doing my PhD many moons ago, I came across Robert Putnam's work, which really looked at this idea of social capital. So I think they're called the glue and the bonds that hold us together as a sense of community. And in Robert Putnam's text, he looks at he claims that there's a demise in the sense of community in terms of looking at the numbers of people participating in bowling clubs, and talks about this wider civic demise. The other key text for me when I was doing my PhD was Jane Jacobs' work, which really looked at how communities are engaged in and relate to the planning of the built environment. And then that led me to another seminal text that really influenced my thinking, which was by a sociologist called Eric Klinenberg, who studied the Chicago heat wave in 1995, where 700 people died. And what he found by looking at the deaths and where they happened in neighborhoods, he found that residents that were more vulnerable were those in deprived areas, so poorer neighborhoods with less resources. But he also found that there was a difference between neighborhoods that had the same social and economic demographics, but the ones that had less social infrastructure, so less places in the public realm for communities to come together and to support each other. And so he observed this idea of social infrastructure, thinking about, there's how you can design and how you can think about a neighborhood of creating places like parks and the public realm, or clubs for people to come together and build this social infrastructure that can then support each other in times of crisis. So this really influenced my thinking around community, how we think about community, how we think about social connection and the built environment. And particularly now, in a time we're going to face more and more crisis, like with the climate crisis, and how we can be resilient in this time of crisis. But the project I'm going to talk about today is about loneliness. And it's a project that we did in the UK, and it came from my work with two colleagues at UCL, and I'm going to explain a bit about them in a minute. But it looks at this idea, which has been covered already, around age and loneliness, because loneliness was, I guess, tended to be associated with older people, but there was a growing evidence base, as we're seeing today and tonight, in the fact that younger people are particularly vulnerable to loneliness, and particularly younger people in the age range of 16 to 24. And this was coming out of data from the ONS in the UK and other large population surveys. And alongside that, there was a growing evidence base, as been mentioned already, about the associated health impacts of loneliness. And that was touched upon in the last presentation as well. So myself and some colleagues at UCL, who are both psychologists, so I come from a geography background, a sort of urban geography background, but I work with two colleagues in our psychology department to look at this issue around young adults' sense of loneliness and their feelings of social connection in particularly deprived neighbourhoods in London. So we wanted to find out some of the subjective causes of loneliness and think about young people's experiences of loneliness in particular places, and particularly building on some of the work that was coming out of the ONS, that younger people in deprived areas had the tendency to be more lonely or feeling more isolated. And so, yeah, again, this links to those ideas that the social networks we have and the design of the built environment can impact upon how connected we feel, and not just to our neighbourhoods, but to each other, and build upon research to think about how young adults perceive their neighbourhoods and the potential for social infrastructure in their neighbourhoods. So how we did this was we did a qualitative study that involved 48 young adults in London who were from neighbourhoods that were classified as deprived according to the ONS survey, in 4 boroughs in London. And we did this, and our key questions were thinking about what places within those neighbourhoods did young people feel particularly lonely or less socially connected, and were there particular qualities of those places where young adults felt disconnected. So we had 48 adults involved in the study, and it was a cross-disciplinary study involving, as I say, psychology and geography, and involving thoughts around planning as well. And we used a technique called free association, where, as well as supported by a survey and an interview that took place within the person's home and in that neighbourhood. And I guess I'm going to focus on the findings from the free association technique. And so this was developed by one of the colleagues involved in the work, Helen Joff. And it was where participants are asked to write and draw about a particular place that they feel most socially connected and least socially connected in their neighbourhood. And they were asked to think about, well, why do they feel that way? And during the interviews, it wasn't set by us as researchers. It was really trying to elicit their views and capture their stories about the environment they live in, encouraging them to talk about what they had drawn and how it made them feel and why they had picked that certain place or certain location. So without us influencing that. So this was the kind of data that we had access to. And some people drew, some people wrote comments, some people spent a long time on their drawings, but really that was to elicit their viewpoints on where they felt most lonely and most socially connected in their neighbourhoods. So analysing the data that we collected, these were the places that were identified as least socially connected and most socially connected across the 4 neighbourhoods and across the 48 individuals involved in the study. And as you can see on the list, some of the same locations came up twice. So some locations like the home and particular parts of the home came up as both being a place where young people felt connected and also less connected. The same, for instance, like parks or educational institutions, which we've heard a bit about this evening, with like schools and universities. Again, some adults felt that these were places where they felt comfortable and connected, but others felt they were least connected. So what we found and what we did with the data was we structured it around particular themata. And so core themata underpin the most prevalent themes that we found in how people spoke about these sites, because it wasn't just about the site, as we saw, because certain places both had that duality of people feeling connected and least connected. So we really focused on the elaborations that came from that free association to really think about what people were describing about those deep-rooted nature of the places and how they experience them in both the public and private realm. I think initially we thought it would be a lot about the public realm, but as we noticed, home came up as a really strong location and a lot of themata around what it means to be at home. So what we found was young people conceptualize and represent their neighborhoods in quite a dialectical manner, thinking about this spectrum of dyads going from places where maybe they felt comfort as one of the things on there, both being busy and comfort as peaceful. And again, it crossed from least socially connected to most socially connected. Similar duality around relationships and sociability, where there were places where people felt disconnected from others, but also really connected to others. Same with the idea of having shared activities going on and familiarity. So there was a real spectrum across these fermata where we found that it was about the qualities of spaces, not the spaces themselves. And so it indicates that one space, such as a park, was having negative connotations for some, but positive connotations for others. So it revealed the quality of those spaces are important, as well as the provision of those types of spaces. So I just wanted to, I'm conscious of time, but pull out some of the quotes that we had and just highlight some of the Marta. So in terms of thinking about feelings of being disconnected from others, one of the things that came up was having nobody to talk to, feeling particularly lonely, even if you're in a place that some might feel was a safe space, like home. So this is a quote from one young person that spoke about feeling lonely at home. But on the contrast, as we said, there were also the place of home came up as a site where people felt comfortable because they're around family. They had those strong sense of social connections. So another example I just wanted to highlight was around comfort and feeling peaceful. And so some adults felt that some spaces they would seek peace, and actually in terms of allowing them to have that time and space to think about issues and get away from people, and this sort of positive aspect that can come from being alone and finding a place to figure things out that are going on. So I just wanted to highlight that, but please do get in touch if you want to find more about the project that we did. And I'm happy to pick up any of the ideas, but just I'm conscious of time and it was a bit of a whistle stop, but I just want to end on thinking about, well, what does this mean? Like, what does this mean if we go back to those big ideas that I started with, of those texts that influenced how I thought about the built environment, and I think about how we connect to the built environment many, many years ago. I guess how going back to this study and going back to thinking about the big question of how do we build and design the places that we live in that promote social connection, that build social infrastructure. I guess reflections from this study from myself and Helen and Sam is the fact that we should acknowledge the diversity of experiences. So we should approach the way we plan and design the built environment to include the voices of young people. If we have more inclusive participatory processes, if we tap into the nature of those qualities, then hopefully we can design the built environment where there's more opportunities to have those positive qualities to promote social connection. So if we take that idea of thinking about those sites for social infrastructure, how can we think about ways to design the public and community realm to have more opportunities for people to feel connected with each other? And that's a growing concern for us in the UK, where sites like libraries and other public spaces and community centres are facing budget cuts and being eroded. So going back to Philip Putnam's work of the erosion of social capital, we can't neglect the fact that it's pressing that we do need to make sure these sites are protected, so we have opportunities for all ages to have the public realm where they can connect. And as I mentioned with the work of Eric Kleinberg, we are facing more and more extreme weather events, extreme circumstances. And so it's a pressing question that we need to think about how these sites can be support us when we need to innovate and be resilient. So that's it from me. Thanks for inviting me along. And yeah, if anyone's got any questions, please do get in touch.
Thank you so much, and I really like these complex results that you have. That's not, it's either or. Each thing can be one thing or another, and I think this really is the complex challenge that we are facing. And thank you for bringing that, and also the connections that you did with Neil. That's our last speaker, who will also be talking about these hazards and these challenge that we have, and that social connection is so important in these times. Thank you so much, Professor Gemma. And next we have also a very special guest, Dr. Camila Ronderos from Colombia. Dr. Camila is also a member of the global initiative on loneliness and connection that Latifat already presented, but she also be speaking about Keralty Foundation and the work that you're doing in the health sector. So be most welcome here. Bienvenida, Camila. Es un gusto tenerte acá. Y please, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
I believe that you are able to share your screen. And
Check. Now I can.
Perfect.
You're seeing the screen now?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Marta, for the
You might
invitation.
have some kind of interference. I don't know if you maybe.
You hear better now?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. If not, let me know and I'll connect the speakers, the headphones. So as Marta mentioned, I will be talking around loneliness, especially in primary care settings, but we work in different kind of settings. I am part of Fundación Keralty in Colombia, and then Keralty Compassionate Communities in the US. We have nonprofits in both countries. As I mentioned, I'm also part of GILC and
Camila, maybe I'll ask you to connect the speakers because it's already also.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. Let me connect them quickly.
Just to be able to
Sometimes
do everything that you say with quality. Now we're not listening. Maybe you have to change the.
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. Much better. Thank you so much.
And my computer stops working normally. I don't know. So as I was saying, I'm also part of GILC. So to finish the introduction around GILC, GILC is that global partnership. Some of the priorities at GILC, which is I represent Colombia in the GILC network, are to raise awareness around the loneliness issues, share global knowledge, drive system change, and develop a flourishing network. So everyone who's on the call and wants to be part of GILC, please do get in touch with us or GILC so that we can do that. And then we want to ensure that being global really means global, not just the globalness that we sometimes is represented in this type of organizations. These are some of our position statements at GILC. So the importance of social connection for health and well-being, the importance of social isolation and how it can impact, well-being, how social well-being has to be independent from other concepts, a wide range of factors that leave people vulnerable to social loneliness and isolation. And you've actually heard a lot of that today. Evidence-based solutions, and then addressing barriers to social connection at different levels. Some of the things that have been done around raising public awareness is doing things around with the World Health Organization, and there's right now actually a committee working specifically around loneliness and isolation. And then, of course, different things that we do, like the World Health Organization Commission, the Grand Challenges, which was it's supposed to be released next year. The Global Policy Lab will also happen next year. We do monthly kitchen chats. We started this month actually around peer-to-peer support on what we're doing and how we can help each other. We have an international scientific board, and then weekly research and partnership newsletters. And then back to what I specifically do, so around the work that we do. So I am Fundación Keralty, and I am part of a global healthcare organization that works, which is called Keralty. That's where our name comes. And we work in 9 different countries. the basis of the Carrollty model was transformed about 5 years ago. And the community side came from the work that the foundation was doing, because when we were working at the local communities, with the communities around loneliness and isolation and health outcomes and how people were being connected, we realized that the healthcare sector was not doing their part of the work. And so we decided to start at home, and we decided to transform our own operation first, and then from there take it on. And so this is the new Carrollty model, in terms of we understand the importance of healthcare, but we also understand the importance of social and community connections so that we can truly transform healthcare. This is some of the research that has been internationally done around the impact of loneliness and a connection. This is, very well known. And so basically the top circles shows the impact on reducing mortality when you actually do social connection. And then the bottom one is that when you take drug treatment for hypertension. So at the end, we shouldn't stop taking our drug treatment for hypertension if we do have that, because it does impact your health. But then we should be worrying more about social connection. And most healthcare services do not care about social connection or are not addressing it. They might understand that it's important, they just don't know how to address it. And so we started talking inside, how do we change that? How do we do something that we can show that this can be done and that we can do something around it? And so we developed this community approach design, we call it, in our company, where we understand that we have to incorporate the real life of our patients. We actually took a sentence from a person in Spain that says, hacer consulta mirando a la calle, which literally would be translated, doing your medical visit looking at the street. And that doesn't mean that you need to have a window. It means that you have to be able to look at the street and the way the people live. And so the way we started is we started in primary care settings. So we changed the way we do primary care. All of our primary care doctors are being trained on how to do this. We empower patients and families to understand the role that they have. Connecting in the local level is crucial. And then we connect and activate community resources at the local level. We now have community health workers working at most of our primary care settings. So the way we work is we have a community health worker that identifies, and helps identify the needs of the patients, is constantly connecting to community resources and identifying what's out there, and then promoting self-care within the community so that everyone understands that it plays a role. The healthcare sector cannot be responsible for all of our health. We only go, if we're bad patients, once a year, so it's 20 minutes. And if we're better patients, we're part of a program, we should go about 6 times a year, right? And so we shouldn't be, expecting the whole healthcare system to be responsible for our health. We don't go enough. And so what are we implementing? And this is the truth pathway that we have right now. I'm going to try to see if I can use the pointer. So what we do is every one of our patients that has been diagnosed for diabetic, hypertension, or mental health gets screened with a Lubin scale, which is a social connection or loneliness scale. Anyone that scores 12 or under, which is the cutoff line for them, will actually get referred to a social prescription. We chose the Lubin. There's many others. The UCLA one, Este in Spanish or in Spain, is used a lot. But at the end, we needed a number that was easily applied in a 20-minute consult. And so both the Este and the UCLA scores are longer to apply. They're sometimes even better, but they're longer to apply. And my argument here was I just need the doctors to have a number: low pressure, blood pressure, low or high, hemoglobin, low or high. So how do we make it easy? How do we make it a single number that people can use, that doctors can use? And so the way we do it, so the provider, the medical doctor, is the one who does the Lubin scale in Colombia. And then if it has under 12, if it's over 12, it just get registered and that's it. If it's under 12 for any of those 3 cohorts that I mentioned, diabetics, hypertension, and mental health issues, there's 3 options. They can do a referral directly to the community resources that the community health worker has identified. It can refer to the community health worker, identifying that they need a little extra support, sort of the training wheels still on the bike. And then a third route is when we feel that they need a lot more support. And then we refer them to activity and a resource that we have within our medical center called Communities of Wellbeing. We do some activities within our medical center for people that are not safe or do not feel comfortable still going out there and connecting to other organizations that they might not know. And we start connecting them slower. But then for the people that are ready and just don't know who to connect with or what to connect with, then we just send them out there. So if you like painting, we have a list of places where you can go and paint with others. And this is just an excuse for you to get connected to others. Once, if you had a low scale, in 6 months we'll screen you to make sure that you're okay. And if you're part of the communities of well-being strategy, which is a 6-week strategy, we'll screen you again when we finish. Everyone that goes through through the communities of well-being at the end has improved both their well-being scale and their Leuven scale, because they get connected to the other people that are participating, and it's really just about being connected to others. So in terms of the resources, our community health workers are constantly out there identifying resources. So this is like a map of what we do. We categorize resources based on categories, so diet, social relationships, environment, community, mind, and movement. And then the provider can choose which ones you want to go to. So if you want something around, how to eat healthier, how to connect to others, and that could just be, connecting you to a food pantry or connect you to an urban garden. But the excuse is really to send you somewhere that you can meet others, and that you can meet others that are like you and that you feel like-minded with people. So it's really about that. We do social prescriptions. This is the numbers of social prescriptions we've done between May and December of 2023. And then the type of social prescriptions. So 64% of our social prescriptions right now are going directly from the doctor to the community resource. And for me, that has been one of my major accomplishments, I would say, because the hardest conversations were with the doctors at the beginning. The medical profession had a hard time at the beginning understanding why they had to refer directly to the community resource. Some would say, I'm not a psychologist, this is not part of my role, why do I have to do this? Once they start seeing, what the patients do, how they feel happy about being connected to others and to those resources. And this could be group of people who play domino on the corner. This could be a group of women who walk in the afternoon, their dogs together. And so that is actually movement, and it gets you out there and it gets you moving, but then it also gets you connected to other people, to other women in your neighborhood. And so that becomes a sustainable relationship in the long run, which was what was important for us when we developed this project. We have currently 90 communities of well-being with around 900 participants. This is the one that I mentioned that is a deeper dive. And then we've done 170 group activities led by us with a partnership from the community, so that it continues happening and people meet people from their own community, so that this becomes a long-term relationship. Uh, and so this is some of the pictures that we have from people in the activities that get organized in that sense. But we've also analyzed costs, because at the end, when you work for the healthcare sector, they want to know how much that costs. And so what we started seeing is that every service where we are, those that are lonely are costing more than those that are not. And so here we're seeing the below 12, and then the greater to 12, and everything, they cost more. But then also, when you start looking at what it is, hospitalization represents the biggest percent of costs for those at risk. So this is true. I mean, there's a lot of research right now in terms of how it's connected. The Surgeon General in the US put out an advisory saying that the biggest epidemic in the US was loneliness. They've talked about families, seniors, women, men. I mean, they've done a lot of research. And so we're doing the research, but we're doing it as a living lab, right? So we are implementing and analyzing at the same time. And sometimes we have to, back up and say, oh, this wasn't the right way, and then just do it again. In Colombia, our target population of these 3 cohorts that I mentioned, it's about 1,500,000 people. We work with the insurance company that is part of our operation, and we insure about 6 million people in Colombia. And then around 1,500,000 people are in those 3 cohorts that I mentioned. And so this is the population that we're targeting right now. The reason why we chose those 3, diabetics, mental health, and hypertension, it's because based on the research that we read, we found that it was one of the ones that was most impacted if you were doing it by yourself, trying to lose weight, trying to eat better, trying to move more, trying to have more activity, trying to feel better about yourself was harder if you do it by yourself, especially the movement part. Getting into the hype of doing some exercise, and exercise could be just walking depending on your ability, right, and to do it at that point is easier if you do it with others. And so that's why we started with some of those cohorts, and we decided to see what happened. The first numbers that I've started getting in terms of intervention, and I didn't bring them because they were just a sneak preview that they gave me, is that once we started implementing this process, in the 6 months after, the people that were part of the program that were receiving a social prescription had about a 30 to 40% higher adherence to their treatment and to their goals than the people that weren't. And then that the people that were getting social prescriptions in the 6 to 8 months period started lowering their cost in around 15 to 20%. So it actually shows a lot. And then at the end, when we're looking at this, it means that you're going less to the hospital. It means that you're going less to the doctor because you're feeling sick, not because you need control. It means that you're not going to the ER. And this for me is well-being, because if you're feeling better and you don't have to be hospitalized, it means you're feeling better. We reapplied the Lubin also, and everyone that has gotten a social prescription, their Lubin has improved. Some of them might not have crossed the 12 barrier and they're still lonely, but then maybe they started at 3 and now they're at 8. And so increasing that number is telling you that the number is going in the right way. And so at the end, we are convinced that only, by strengthening the capabilities and social capital, which has been talked about today, in the communities and involving all the key players in understanding that healthcare happens everywhere, will we really achieve, sustainable outcomes in different ways. And that's why we decided that we are not only working with the communities to empower the communities, but also changing the way healthcare is done. This is the primary care example. We've done this in palliative care. We've started with oncology units as well. And we are starting a pilot with one of our ER, at one of our biggest hospitals, to see how we can understand at the ER level those frequent flyers at the ER, because they're probably being frequent flyers because they are not feeling well and they are not connected and they don't have a good support system. In palliative care, we've had amazing results in understanding the importance of the circles of care, we call them there, and how people are participating in that care. And in that case, it's not just for the person who has the condition, but for the whole people that are around it, especially the primary caretaker, who sometimes gets sicker than the actually person that they're caring for, because of the overwhelmingness of the whole process. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Camila. It was really inspiring to listen to your work, and also to be so rooted to the reality, and to know a concrete example from the things that we have been talking these days. And it's really nice to see and to know about your example. So thank you very much for your speech. It was really good to have you here also. And we are reaching to the end of our day with Neil. Neil, hello. Neil is almost Portuguese right now. He spends almost more time here in Portugal than in the UK. But Neil is a professor, and he works in UK, and it's from UK, and also has his work in relationship project. That's a project that we like very much in our Relational lab. It's a long distance partner. And so Neil, be welcome here. It's a pleasure always to hear you, and to have you closing this seminar, I think, will be very special. So the floor is yours.
Okay, good evening. I wish I was there now. It is cold here. Anyway, I'm Neil, and I'm not trusted to move my own slides on. So when I do that, Nono, should we try the slides? Should we practice? There we go. Marvelous. So I'm Neil. I'm co-leader of the Relationships Project. I'm a mediator, but I'm here because I'm also the co-founder of the After Disasters Network. And therefore, I'm going to talk about relationships and strong communities in crisis and beyond. So what's the first question? The first question is, what's a disaster? Well, simply put, a disaster is the result of an interaction of vulnerability plus hazard, or stressor and shock. And that means a disaster can be caused either by a big shock, so think earthquake or pandemic, or a very vulnerable system, think famine or poverty. And at some point that system reaches tipping point, and then the widespread harm requires more resources than the system can provide. Now, a disaster is not a single sudden event. It's a complex buildup of relationships between things that aren't working. But I'm here tonight to argue that at its core, it's about bad human relationships. Let's explain that using an example. On the 14th of June in 2017, there was a fire in a high-rise apartment block called Grenfell Tower in northwest London that killed 72 people and irreparably harmed hundreds, if not thousands, more. I spent 6 months there working directly with those affected. And there was a lot of demand at the time to understand what happened. What happened on that night? And what happened, what was the hazard, the shock? Well, it was started with a fridge. So a fire at the back of a fridge that then spread, but that doesn't really explain the disaster, because a fridge fire doesn't normally end up looking like this. So what was more important in Grenfell is how did it happen? And that, when we started to investigate it, reveals a much more complex set of relationships between things that created vulnerability to shock. And in terms of how the fire spread, it was about a recent refurbishment of the building that combined poor window fitting with flammable cladding and insulation that was built in a way that created ventilation and therefore stressed the vulnerable system and pushed it beyond the tipping point. But that's not the most important question that people really wanted to understand. What they were asking us is, why did it happen and how could we let it happen in the richest borough in the UK? And again, that's a complex system, but it's a human one. And it's one where transactional thinking overtook relational thinking. It was a complex system with human relationships that over time were reduced to transactional exchanges. And it was a gradual process of dehumanization and of enemy thinking that in the minds of the local authority, who were the landlords, the local government, that turned those people living in that tower from neighbour into resident, from resident into customer, from customer into complainer, and then finally from the complainant into the competent. And it was that system that allowed a €320,000 saving to replace the fire retardant cladding with something that burnt faster than petrol into something that became a reasonable decision. And through that lens, I would suggest we see Grenfell as a disaster that began years before the night of the fire. And it should make us not only attentive to fire safety and cladding systems, which is important, but really make us attentive to dehumanized human systems wherever they're operating. Thank you. So let's think about vulnerability and hazard through the lens of relationships for a minute. We're seeing communities that are still suffering from COVID, that are still affected by the cost of living crisis. We're seeing an increase in mental ill health and isolation. So within communities, we're seeing them more vulnerable than I've seen them for a long time. But we're also seeing a breakdown in relationships between groups. Particularly in Europe, we're seeing an increase in migration that will only get more acute as the impact of climate crisis makes more and more places inhabitable. It's increasing perceptions of competition and decreasing perceptions of safety. We've got the largest land conflict in Europe that we've seen since World War II, and the conflicts in the Middle East are driving separation and anger on our streets. If we add digital echo chambers and the mis and disinformation that's happening, then it's no surprise that instead of tending to the bridges that hold our communities together, many of us are actually building walls. But we're also seeing trust in government and other authorities becoming into crisis point. We're seeing conspiracy theories take hold, and we're seeing riots in our cities. And as hazards and shocks are increasing, from the wildfires in Portugal, the floods in Valencia, and I could go around the world, but I haven't got time. What we're seeing is that the relationships between state and the community post-disaster are becoming increasingly hostile. But that's a very depressing way to end what's been a great evening of presentations. So, and I'm a mediator, and conflict transformation encourages us to flip that question of what we don't want into a positive question of what we do want. So let's imagine a place that has strong relationships and collaborations within groups, the bonding capacity, between groups, their bridging capacity, and across power and resource gradients, the linking capacity. One where we think more about relations than we do transactions, a system that is personal, that's warm, that's trusting, and that uses the energy of difference and disagreement in creative and positive ways. What changes when crisis hits? Well, that's a funny slide. Well, crisis, there we go, that's better. Let's go for that one. What changes? Well, building on Klinenberg's work about heat waves and social infrastructure, colleagues have explored connection, collaboration, and trust, what we're calling relational infrastructure. And the research is really clear. When crisis comes, they keep us alive. From the tsunami that we saw in 2010 across the coastal towns in Japan, we saw a difference in fatality that was a factor of 10. So in those communities that were more connected, more trusting and more collaborative, a vast number more people survived than is those places where that didn't exist. But it's not just about immediate survival, it's also about how we recover. Again, I could take you around the world on these, but I don't have time. But from Japan, India, New Orleans, everywhere we've looked, we're seeing that recovery from natural and other disasters doesn't depend on the overall amount of aid received or the amount of damage done by the disaster. Actually, it's social capital, the bonds which tie citizens together, that function as the main engine of long-term recovery. And if you want to read more about that, look up Daniel Aldrich. But a community with these characteristics doesn't just sit there ready to respond when things go wrong. Resilience and growth are two sides of the same relational coin. And I would argue that they form a virtuous cycle, one where connected communities are better at coping with disaster, recovering from disaster, building resilience for future shock, but also thriving in the good times and supporting each other in the bad. And if we start to join up our thinking, we start to see it's all about relationships. Relationships that are actually fundamental to strong communities. So whichever discipline or perspective you're coming from, and we've heard this tonight, the importance of the work in schools, the wisdom of the story of Latifa's father and her insight into the invisible epidemic and how we can transform our workplaces, from Camilla about its importance to health and primary care, from Gemma about how to put relationships at the heart of how we do research, as well as the heart of how we build our physical environment. All of this impacts on the social and relational infrastructure. Manuela talked about toolkits. A lot of my work is to help communities implement the Bridge Builders Handbook, and that encourages us to think like a mediator, to listen to what may sound difficult and different, and to try and see the issue from a different person's perspective. And by doing so, to discover more of the values and how they relate to yours and what we have in common. I would ask us here tonight to start thinking about how those principles can be applied to our work and our practice and the networks that we're trying to build around good relationships. I'd ask us to be the change that we want to see and to start building some bridges between each other. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Neil, and thank you for ending with such quality. I knew that you were going to be very inspiring, and you were. So thank you so much to be here today and your availability to share with us your knowledge, not only in After Disaster Network, but also Relationship Project and all the work that you do in your university. So thank you so much, Neil, once more. And we are getting to the end of our session, but we really wanted to open up for questions if you have some. So if you have some question that you would like to pose to some of our speakers, I think they would be delighted to answer. You can write it on the chat if you want to be easy, and I can read to them and to select to the one who will be answering to your questions. And while you were thinking, maybe I can ask, normally in these sessions we have always Professor Maria Luisa Lima, who ends our sessions with some conclusion regards, just to close the sessions that we are doing this week, because it's our inspiration for this week was Professor Maria Luisa Lima, and she's helping us with this work. And so maybe as you think about your questions, we can listen to your closing regards, and then if there is any question, I can pose to the speakers. The floor is yours, Professor.
So I'm very grateful for this very rich session. I'm grateful for all the participants who agreed to come here and share their knowledge. And I'm not just saying that. I really feel that, because you have really brought here a new perspective on loneliness. And I'm very proud that we are in a group where there are so many psychologists, and there was so little mental health issues that we raised during this session. And because the pain experienced by loneliness, it's individually felt, but it is as we have seen here, it is a social and structural problem. And during many years, loneliness was seen really only as an individual problem, and putting in that way, it is really blaming the victim. And here, Manuela and Latifat and Jima and Camila and Neil made us understand very clearly that first of all, this is a global problem that needs global solutions. And the inspiring work of Lafitat was really, and Camila showed that there is a global movement that is trying to tackle this problem, but also that the problem is not only, or cannot be only reached by putting everyone in the psychologist or in the psychiatrist, but it is this is a social and global problem of relationships and power relationships, and not the virtuous circles, as Neil put it, are come from the examples that we come here with participatory processes, with community processes, with and with empowering processes, not with patronizing or blaming the victim. And that was so inspiring to see a set of presentations that really put the tonic on a new narrative, as Manuela called it, on loneliness. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I don't think we have any question. I think they will pop on your emails after this session for sure. So I just wanted to say thank you again to all the speakers and to all the participants that were here with us today, and also to Professor Maria Luisa Lima. It's always inspiring to listen to you in this end of sessions. So to all of you, thank you so much for being here and to inspire us with all your work. I learned so many things today that I'm for sure going to still be thinking about the things that you share with us for these next few days. So thank you so much, and count on Relational Lab on your work. So we are here for you in whatever thing that you might need, and we're more than happy to help. And for the rest of participants, it's the same. For the Portuguese speaking participants, we'll still have a session on Friday and on Monday, so you can follow our social networks and your email to see what's next on this thematic week. I promise that will be as good as today, I'm sure. And for the English-speaking participants, I'm very happy that you were here, and it filled my heart to see that we had participants from the US, the UK, South Africa, And so it's very nice to be all together in this place today and to think of such a global issue as this that we were talking about. So have a very good day. For the ones who are going to rest well, and for the ones who still have a day ahead, please enjoy your day and your end of the week. See you soon.